I work the night shift as a janitor at an old library in Maine. It's a quiet, eerie place, especially at night. The building is massive, with high ceilings, creaky wooden floors, and shelves that seem to stretch forever. Some parts of the library are so old they feel like stepping into another century. One night, around 2 a.m., I was doing my usual rounds. The place was silent, as it always is at that hour. Normally, I don't mind the quiet. It's peaceful in a way. But that night, something felt different. The silence was heavier, almost oppressive. I was in the archives, the oldest and least visited part of the library. Hardly anyone goes in there. It's mostly filled with dusty books and forgotten papers. As I swept the floor, I heard a faint sound. At first, I thought it was just the building settling. Old buildings make noises, right? But this was different. It was a steady tapping, like fingernails drumming on wood. I paused, straining to hear. The sound was coming from deeper in the archives, past the shelves where the light barely reached. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe a loose window or a bird outside. But the sound didn't stop. It was rhythmic, deliberate, almost like it wanted to be noticed. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the noise. It led me to a small, nondescript door I'd never noticed before. It was tucked behind a row of shelves, half hidden in the shadows. The door was slightly open, and the tapping was coming from inside. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, to walk away. But I couldn't. I had to know what was making that sound. I pushed the door open, shining my flashlight into the room. It was a small storage closet, cramped and cluttered with old books, strange artifacts, and dust so thick it looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The tapping stopped the moment I entered the room. I stood there, heart pounding, scanning the space with my flashlight. There was no one there. But then, I noticed something on a small table in the corner, a book lying open. It looked ancient, with a leather cover that was cracked and peeling. The pages were yellowed with age, and the writing on them wasn't in any language I recognized. The letters seemed to twist and shift when I looked at them, as if they were alive. I reached out to touch the book, but before my hand could make contact, the tapping started again. This time, it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the hallway behind me. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned around, shining my flashlight into the corridor. It was empty, but the sound kept getting louder, closer. It wasn't just tapping anymore. It was scraping, like claws dragging along wood. And then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, something moved. At first, I thought it was a person, but the way it moved wasn't right. It was hunched over, its arms too long, its head tilted at an odd angle. Its movements were jerky, almost like it was struggling to stay upright. Then the figure took a step toward me. I panicked. Slamming the storage door shut, I locked it and pressed my back against it, gripping the flashlight so hard my knuckles turned white. The tapping had stopped again, replaced by an eerie silence. My heart was racing, and my hands were trembling. I stayed in that room, too scared to move or even breathe. When I finally mustered the courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. Whatever it was gone. I walked back to my cart as quickly as I could, glancing over my shoulder the entire time. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? It sounded crazy, even to me. The next night I tried to avoid the archives, but as I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights made my skin crawl. Around 2 a.m., I was cleaning near the break room when one of the security guards, Randall, walked in. He looked pale, his usual no-nonsense demeanor replaced by something close to fear. "Have you seen anything?" "Weird around here?" he asked. I hesitated. I didn't want to sound crazy, but there was something in his voice that made me trust him. So I told him about the tapping, the shadow, and the storage room. Randall's face went even paler. He told me he'd seen strange things on the security cameras, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, doors opening and closing on their own. He said other staff had whispered about odd occurrences, but no one took it seriously. Together, we decided to check the footage. The security room was small and cramped, filled with monitors showing grainy footage of the library's corridors. At first, everything looked normal. But then, on one of the screens, we saw it. A shadow moved along the wall of the archives, too distorted to be human. It crept toward the same storage room I'd been in. Randall suggested we go check it out. I didn't want to, but I couldn't let him go alone. We made our way to the archives, every step filled with dread. When we reached the storage room, the door was slightly open again. Inside, it was just as I'd left it, dusty and cluttered. But something felt off. As we turned to leave, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from somewhere deep in the shelves. I didn't stay to find out what it was. That was the last time I went near the archives. To this day, I don't know what I saw, and honestly, I don't want to know. Step into the abyss, and welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and join our ever-growing community of the curious. Your support is the lifeblood that keeps this channel alive. Now, prepare yourself, for what you're about to witness is not for the faint of heart. I have an unusual job. I fix wind turbines. You know, those giant windmills you see in wide open fields? My job takes me high into the sky to keep them working. It's not the kind of job many people do, but I love it. It's quiet. The views are incredible, and it gives me plenty of time to think. This story happened in the plains of Oklahoma, near the Wichita Mountains. The wind farm was in a remote area, far from towns or people. It was perfect for turbines, but the isolation gave it an eerie feel. What happened that evening still gives me chills when I think about it. It was late in the day, around 5:30 p.m. I was finishing a repair that had taken longer than usual. The turbines stood tall against the horizon, their blades slowly turning in the wind. As I prepared to climb down, I heard a strange sound. At first, I thought it was the wind or a bird, but it wasn't like anything I'd heard before. It was almost like a growl mixed with a howl. I paused, scanning the area from my high perch. The plains stretched out in all directions, empty except for the turbines and patches of dry grass. I told myself I was imagining things. After a long day of work, it's easy for your mind to play tricks on you. But then I saw something that made my heart stop. In the fading light, a dark shape emerged on the ground below. It looked like a dog at first, but as I focused, I realized it was much larger. It stood tall, with a sleek, muscular body covered in jet black fur. Its eyes glowed red. I froze. My hands gripped the ladder tightly as I stared down at the creature. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze locked on me. The weight of its presence was pressing down on everything. Then it howled. It wasn't just loud. It felt like it traveled through my body, vibrating in my chest and bones. I couldn't move. I was completely frozen, unsure of what to do. Finally, the creature turned and disappeared into the shadows. I let out a shaky breath, relieved it was gone. But my relief didn't last long. As I packed up my tools and prepared to climb down, I heard movement. At first, it was faint, like the sound of dry grass rustling in the wind. But then it grew louder. Something big was moving. I flicked on my headlamp and shone it around, but all I saw were the turbines and the rolling planes. The sound stopped, and everything was quiet again. I hurried down the ladder, my hands trembling so much that I had to focus to keep my grip. When I reached the bottom, I glanced around nervously. That's when I saw it again. The creature stood on a hill not far from the turbine, its silhouette sharp against the rising moon. Its red eyes burned in the darkness, unblinking and fixed on me. I didn't waste any time. I jumped into my truck and sped away. The whole drive back, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see it chasing me. But the road behind me stayed empty. For days after, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried convincing myself it was just a large dog or some kind of wild animal. But the size, the eyes, and the howl, it didn't make sense. At work, I casually asked one of the older guys about wildlife in the area. When I mentioned glowing red eyes, his face went pale. He warned me to be careful. "Some things out here don't like to be disturbed," he said. He wouldn't explain further, but his words stayed with me. Despite my fear, I felt drawn back to the wind farm. A few nights later, I found myself driving back there. I told myself it was just to prove that nothing was out there, but deep down, I knew I was hoping to see it again. I parked far from the turbines and walked toward the hill where I'd last seen the creature. The moon lit up the landscape and every shadow seemed to move, but there was nothing. I started visiting the site more often, usually at night. Each time, I felt like the creature was watching, even though I never saw it. The silence of the plains felt alive, as if something unseen was always there. Months passed, and my visits became a strange routine. Then one night, as I sat on the hill, I heard the howl again. It was distant this time, faint but unmistakable. Strangely, I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt a sense of closure, like the creature was saying goodbye. I started visiting the site more often, usually at night. Each time I felt like the creature was watching, even though I never saw it. The silence of the plains felt alive, as if something unseen was always there. Months passed, and my visits became a strange routine. Then one night, as I sat on the hill, I heard the howl again. It was distant this time, faint but unmistakable. Strangely, I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt a sense of closure, like the creature was saying goodbye. My dear watchers, your presence is a gift. Thank you for your time, your curiosity, your courage. But remember, there are others who wander, unaware of the dangers that await. By liking this video and subscribing, you offer them a light in the darkness. Support our channel and keep the stories coming, simply by giving a thumbs up and subscribing and sharing. My grandma raised my sister Sharon and me in a small house surrounded by gardens. She was the heart of our family, full of stories and wisdom passed down through generations. One of her most important lessons was this: respect the woods, and they'll respect you. But if you cross the wrong line, the lurker won't forgive so easily. The lurker was the name Grandma gave to the lurker of the forest. She described it as a creature unlike anything else, a towering figure that moved silently among the trees, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. Grandma insisted it wasn't a story to scare us, but a truth we had to live by. On the edge of our property stood a mossy stone wall that stretched far into the woods. "This is the boundary," Grandma told us many times. "Don't cross it. The lurker protects what's on the other side. Stay on our side, and you'll be safe." As kids, we believed her without question. Every harvest season, Grandma would gather fruits and vegetables from our garden and leave a basket on the wall. She called it an offering, a gesture of respect for the lurker. "We share what we have," she said. "It keeps the peace." Sharon and I didn't always understand the importance of these rituals, but we followed Grandma's rules, most of the time. By the time I was 12, I started questioning her stories. Sharon, a year older than me, teased me for still believing in them, and I hated feeling like the little sister. Our arguments grew more frequent that year. Sharon had a knack for getting under my skin, and I wasn't very good at letting things go. One February evening, she came home with a heart-shaped box of chocolates from a boy I had a crush on. I was furious, and I didn't hide it. When Grandma told me to go to my room and cool off, it only made me angrier. I sat by the window, staring at the snow-covered yard, fuming over how unfair it all felt. My gaze drifted to Sharon's bed and the shiny box of chocolates on her nightstand. I decided to take them, not to eat, but to prove a point, to ruin something she cared about like she had ruined my day. Without thinking it through, I slipped the box into my hands, put on my coat and boots, and snuck outside. The cold air stung my face as I stepped into the yard. My only thought was to leave the chocolates on the wall. Somehow, in my childish mind, it felt like a small victory. The closer I got to the wall, the more nervous I became. I couldn't explain why, but the air felt different. When I reached the wall, I hesitated for a moment before placing the box on top of the mossy stones. As I turned to leave, I heard a low growl. My stomach knotted, and I froze. The sound didn't belong to any animal I knew. It was deep, rough, and carried a strange, almost angry tone. Then came a foul smell, like something rotting in the sun. I glanced over my shoulder and saw movement among the trees. My breath hitched as a figure emerged, an impossibly thin creature with limbs that moved in ways they shouldn't. Its head was bare, bony, and unnatural, with two glowing points where eyes should have been. I ducked behind a tree. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. The creature sniffed the air, its glowing eyes scanning the snow. For a moment, I thought it might leave. Then it turned its head toward me. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it wouldn't notice me. The smell grew stronger, and I heard its slow steps on the snow. My chest felt tight, and I thought I might faint. "Mara!" Grandma's voice broke the silence, calling my name from the house. Light from her flashlight swept across the woods, and the creature stopped. It turned away, its long limbs vanishing into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. When Grandma reached me, I was trembling and couldn't stop crying. I told her everything, stealing the chocolates, crossing the wall, and seeing the lurker. She listened, her face stern but calm. "You've learned why we respect the woods," she said, wrapping me in her shawl. "Now, let's make things right." The next morning, we returned to the wall. The chocolates were gone, and strange tracks marked the snow on the other side. Grandma left a new basket with fruits and whispered a prayer I didn't understand. After that night, I never doubted her stories again. I apologized to Sharon and saved my allowance to buy her new chocolates. Though we still had our disagreements, I never let my anger lead me back to the wall. Even now, I can't walk near those woods without thinking about the lurker. Grandma's words stay with me. Just because you don't see something every day doesn't mean it isn't there. It was New Year's Eve, and the small town of Willow Creek was buzzing with excitement. Families had gathered on the big hill in the park to watch the fireworks. The sky was clear and full of stars, twinkling like tiny diamonds. Some kids pointed out constellations while others munched on popcorn, waiting for midnight. Among the crowd was Mia, a curious 10-year-old with her trusty telescope. She loved stargazing and had begged her parents to bring it along. 10 minutes to midnight, someone shouted. Suddenly, the first fireworks shot up into the air, bursting into colorful blooms of red, green, and gold. Everyone cheered. But as the fireworks lit up the sky, Mia noticed something strange through her telescope. "Dad," she whispered, tugging at her father's sleeve. "Look, over there, near the stars." Her dad leaned down, squinting at the patch of sky Mia pointed to. He didn't see anything at first, but then it appeared. A glowing silver object zipped across the sky, moving in a way no plane or helicopter ever could. "Mia, is this a trick?" he asked, laughing nervously. "I swear I'm not joking," Mia said. More people started noticing the strange light. It wasn't shaped like any firework. It darted left, right, and even hovered in one spot for a moment. The crowd grew quieter. "Is it a drone?" someone asked. "No drone moves that fast," said another. Mia's mom, who loved science, muttered, "It could be a satellite or something else." The glowing object suddenly shot straight up into the sky, leaving a faint trail of light behind. Then it vanished. "Whoa!" The crowd gasped in unison. Just then, the clock struck midnight. Fireworks exploded again, filling the sky with dazzling colors. People cheered, but their minds were still on what they had just seen. Back home, Mia couldn't stop thinking about the silver object. She wrote everything down in her notebook, hoping someday she'd figure out the truth. Years later, the mystery of that New Year's UFO became one of the town's favorite stories. Some believed it was a spaceship, while others thought it was just a strange reflection. But for Mia, it was the night she truly fell in love with the stars and the secrets they might hold. In a forgotten town surrounded by dense forests, the abandoned Hollow Ridge Asylum stood as a grim reminder of a darker past. Built over a century ago, the hospital once housed people seeking help for troubled minds. It was closed abruptly after strange events that no one dared to discuss. Over time, it gained a reputation for being haunted, its shadowy halls hiding secrets too terrible to uncover. Three curious friends decided to explore the asylum on a cold autumn night. Armed with flashlights and a camera, they walked through the overgrown path leading to the building. The asylum loomed ahead, its ivy-covered walls cracked and broken. Windows were shattered, and the air around it seemed colder than the rest of the world. The heavy wooden door creaked loudly as they pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Inside, the air smelled of dampness and decay. The floor was littered with broken furniture, scattered papers, and strange drawings. Eyes, hands, and odd symbols were scrawled across the peeling walls as though left by someone in a desperate frenzy. Deeper into the asylum, the air grew heavier. Whispers began to drift through the silence, faint and hard to catch, like the wind murmuring secrets. The whispers grew louder as they moved forward, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The friends reached a hallway with a door marked "Treatment Ward." The door was slightly ajar, and a faint flickering light came from within. The room seemed untouched by time, with medical charts and photographs scattered across dusty shelves. A wheelchair stood in the corner, facing the wall, as if someone had left it there years ago. As they stepped closer, the whispers stopped. A heavy silence filled the room, pressing against their ears. Without warning, the wheelchair spun around. Sitting in it was a figure shrouded in darkness, its face completely blank. Fear gripped the explorers, and they fled from the room, their footsteps echoing wildly through the empty corridors. The asylum seemed to come alive. The hallways twisted, stretching unnaturally, and doors that had been shut were now open. The whispers returned, louder and more urgent, filling the air with unrecognizable words that scratched at their minds. Shadows shifted in the corners of their vision, never fully forming, but always present. In the confusion, the friends became separated. One wandered into a room filled with broken mirrors. The fractured glass reflected not her image, but dozens of hollow-eyed figures staring back. Their mouths moved in silent screams, their empty eyes locked onto hers. Another descended a staircase into the basement. The air became colder with every step, and the whispers turned into faint cries. The room at the bottom held rows of rusted beds with leather restraints hanging limply from the sides. A shadow moved in the corner, revealing the faceless figure from the wheelchair. Its bony hand rose, pointing toward him, and the cries grew deafening. Upstairs, the last of the group found the main entrance. Relief surged as they pushed against the door, but it would not open. The whispers ceased, leaving a suffocating silence in their place. Turning around, they came face to face with a woman in a tattered hospital gown. Her hair fell in long, tangled strands, hiding her face. Her head tilted unnaturally as she reached out, her fingers sharp and blackened. The next morning, the townspeople found the friends' flashlights and camera abandoned outside the asylum. The camera contained a single video. The recording showed the three standing in a dark hallway, their faces pale and their eyes blank. Behind them, shadows moved, and a faint voice whispered, "They belong to us now." My dear watchers, your presence is a gift. Thank you for your time, your curiosity, your courage. But remember, there are others who wander, unaware of the dangers that await. By liking this video and subscribing, you offer them a light in the darkness. Support our channel and keep the stories coming, simply by giving a thumbs up and subscribing and sharing.